Hello, hello, everyone. Let me just show the correct screen that we've got going on here. Just getting myself set up, guys. I am by. Hi. Hopefully, be being joined very soon by Charlie and Matt, who are currently out on the road setting up for aircon. But what we're going to be doing is going to go through and have a little explore of our newest game, Sisterhood, and take you through all of the awesome stuff that we've got as part of this nuns launch. So I think first thing I'm probably going to do is I'm probably just going to jump into this page so that I can have a quick flick through. So yeah, we've got all kinds of goodies as part of this launch. This was a project that really kind of spiraled out of control because what originally happened was me and Charlie were talking about making a fun nun game. I know that him and Adam had been working on a particularly dark shiver adventure, and me and Charlie started talking about this idea for a nun game, and what had originally been a zine turned into a full book, and then a full book turned into a whole swathe of things. So tell you what, let's sling the video on, so we can take a little watch of that, because I've actually only got to watch this one.
The apocalypse is nigh, and only one thing stands in its otherworldly threats. They are the line of defense against the end of days. Nuns are the perfect camouflage for this kind of fight. Very few expect sisters to be packing a shotgun under the habit, or for them to be ready to punch a demon's teeth in. The Sisterhood infiltrate, investigate, and eradicate any forces that may wish to end the world, by any means necessary. The Sisterhood will face factions from both heaven and hell, angered that World War II did not herald the apocalypse. Now in full rebellion, they hunger for the end times. The four horsemen of the apocalypse ride out with a new leader, Sariel, the shit-heeled son of the devil, the Antichrist. On earth, so it is in heaven. A rebellious angelic horde take up the cry of annihilation, plotting to wipe out humanity for good. Slay angels, protect existence, and hold on tight to your faith. Sisters all fight by the way of the cross, an ancient battle tactic that can be applied to any environment you find yourself in. Wield revolvers and rosaries in equal measure to crush your foes, with fast-paced tactical combat. Sharpen your blades, reload your revolvers, and don your wimples. It's time to beat the apocalypse. Welcome to the Sisterhood.
Hype. So hype. Fun fact, Charlie's girlfriend actually did that video for us. We put that together, the video together real close to the end, because originally we looked at creating this in just kind of like a black and white style, maybe with a few bits of color pop. I know that the core element of design on the color actually came from the horsemen, because we wanted to have a specific color identity for each of the horsemen to have them have that nice contrast against the black and white of the nuns. But we ended up adding the red and gold in to the nun sort of designs as well, because it just gave them that little bit of depth whilst keeping that kind of pulpy graphic novel style as well. So let's jump into a bit more about sort of the themes of Sisterhood. So Sisterhood is set in the 1950s. It's set just after World War II. And the idea behind the setting is that after World War II, a few things have happened. One, loads of people have been displaced. The world has kind of been thrown up into a state of turmoil and change. And one of the things that happens as a result of that is there's a huge influx of people into the Catholic Church from various backgrounds, either pious faithful entering the church for reasons of faith, but also reasons of pragmatism, people fleeing from different countries and different circumstances, joining the church as a safe haven. And so we like taking that idea to having this collection of women from all around the world united together in this singular kind of organization, because the idea then became, well, when you have this diversity of people coming into an organization, it makes sense that there's also going to be a lot of skills, a lot of interesting backgrounds entering as well, and what would happen to the organization if that happens. And so when you take that idea and then you smash this other idea that was the other core concept, which is the horsemen are really pissed off that the world didn't end with World War II. So I'm just going to check with Adam that. Sounding good. The horsemen are really, really angry that the world didn't end with World War II. They're like, yeah, it's a good deal. We know it's happening. It's all going to be over. And then the war ends and they're kind of twiddling their thumbs going, well, we thought this was it. So the other part of the core concept of the setting is that the four horsemen have been riled up by the son of the devil, the Antichrist, has become the fifth horseman called Conquest. And he is leading them in the charge to try and end the world. And so the Sisterhood then comes out as an opposing force, this force that has come out of the war that is aiming to keep that peace, set up that new unified world that isn't divided, and stop the horsemen from ending the world. And that becomes the kind of core conflict and brings in all of these sisters from around the world of various backgrounds and takes their skills that they have and puts them in a united purpose, which is the Sisterhood. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Let's see if we can get some audio. We're Parable on the road. I can hear you guys now. You good? Hello.
Hello.
Hey, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, laptop was muted. We are here. We're in the room.
Awesome. Welcome, welcome. I've only just started getting started. We've watched the trailer, and I've just talked a little bit about kind of the concept, Charlie. So going into talking about how Sisterhood kind of originally started out as a zine-sized project and grew as we kind of got into the setting. Talks a little bit about the visual style and how we developed it from being just black and white into the kind of coloured gold and coloured horsemen that we've got now, and then digging a little bit into the foundation of the theme and the setting with the Sisterhood and then the horsemen.
Cool. So I'm Charlie. So I'm the creative director at Parable Games. And this is Matt. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Matt. I'm the most recent addition to the team at Parable. And so this is my first campaign with you guys. And it's all very exciting so far.
Yes. So Matt's also been like a regular part of our game group and also play testing for Sisterhoods. So we've been having a blast moving little nuns around on our battle maps and blasting one another and punching some demons. But yeah, so Barney, as you've kind of kicked off the stream, like where would you like to go next? What bit do we want to discuss?
Well, I think kind of the most sensible thing to do here would probably be to just move through the page, because we've kind of laid it out in that order that makes sense for people so they can get an understanding of the world and kind of all the things that we've made. So we'll come back to all of the stuff that we've got kind of on offer later, because I want to focus more on the world and the games initially. So I've talked quite a bit about the kind of the founding of the Sisterhood already, but Charlie, I'd love to hear a bit from you about kind of like where the idea behind this world came from, what kind of your inspirations were when you were digging into this as a project.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually the germ of the idea came from some research we were doing for a Shiver project. So some of you who are familiar with like some of the other stuff that we make, Shiver is our kind of like big make your own horror movie RPG. And while I was doing a bit of research for one of those stories, I landed on like a really interesting factoid about the Catholic Church and nuns in particular, after kind of World War II, is that it was the most diverse and populous recruitment of nuns in recorded history. That was found because a lot of people kind of post World War II were migratory. They were displaced by the war. So especially kind of in the European and Northern African territories, there was a huge amount of movement, and convents and becoming a nun for women became a large place of kind of like refuge, a kind of an option kind of where they could go. And it was a really interesting time because you obviously have people from all different kind of faiths and cultures and backgrounds kind of coming together and landing these convents in different places. The thing that kind of really interested me as well is that you kind of had this diversity of skills and abilities and careers that were coming and basically having a skill flush into the convent system, which was really interesting. And then that kind of fed into me like reading more about Catholic renewal in the 1950s and how nuns were instrumental kind of in that, of like entering schools and hospitals, I think run by the church. And that's where the idea started to kind of get molded, of this idea of taking renewal and this idea of like kind of nuns from different backgrounds being used as tools, but in this case being used as soldiers kind of in a secret war that maybe people weren't aware of that basically that secret force, by using all of their gathered abilities to try and stop the end of the world. So that was where the original germ of the idea for the game and the setting itself came from. But the fascination with nuns as characters, I think, is something I touched on in the previous stream of interactions with nuns I've had over my life, as well as in media, in comics, in various other things. Like, I'm just going to say it, nuns are having a moment. The amount of nuns in media at the moment is crazy. The amount of films that have nuns in, and I just couldn't really escape it. And it kind of just felt like the time was right.
I think it's interesting as well, that point that you make about that skill influx and kind of renovation of a portion of the Catholic Church, with all of those women coming in after the World War. Because I know that there's quite a few films and cultural touch points that have come out. Immaculate is one that springs to mind, that covers the other end of that, where the kind of convent system of support is now collapsing because there's not enough nuns in the system. So it's interesting to look at the start of that journey, as well as the state that kind of that's in at the moment as well. Yeah, really, really cool. So yeah, one of the things I touched on talking about that sort of insert skills is the way that then primes up the Catholic Church and the idea of this sisterhood, this secret organization that is there to put those skills to work against the things that are going bump in the night. So I've talked a little bit about kind of the background of the Horsemen and what's riled them up, but I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of the design of the Horsemen, the thoughts behind the Horsemen in this setting, because obviously we've done our own twist on what the Horsemen look like, and so yeah, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So designing the Horsemen with Ben and Adam was an absolute hoot. Like, they are the idea of the Four Horsemen apocalypse has always been something that's fascinated me from quite an early age, and like all the different representations in media. But I really wanted to bring something unique to the way that the Horsemen are represented, kind of when they're on Earth. And actually, if you think about kind of what the Horsemen are in terms of what they're designed for, they're designed with a specific link to the world, of that they are the harbingers, they are the ones who are quite literally made to end it. So it kind of feels like the very much in a Ghostbusters style thing of choosing the form of your own doom. What we do to our world potentially is what is then bled out into the Horsemen. And that was something that I really wanted to bring into the four core Horsemen. I'll talk about the fifth new one in a moment because he's a bit of a different beast. But for the main four Horsemen, I kind of wanted to take these archetypal ideas that they represent of death, of pestilence, of famine, of war, and figure out in a post-World War II climate, what do they actually look like? Like, kind of, what do these ideas look like from the impacts that kind of horrible, like, world-changing event had? So we start with war. I think it's kind of like talk about World War II. War has like kind of some of the more like classical elements of like what you kind of expect with war, with his swords and kind of like weaponry. But one of the descriptions I remember that I sent to Ben is that I wanted war to feel like, and you'll see this in some of the other artwork, a bloated chested, puffed out general, kind of striding around bold as brass kind of on a battlefield. And kind of in more of the artwork, you'll see he's festooned with medals kind of across his chest of the dead. And you've got all of these weapons, rather than him actually having them equipped, the weapons are stabbed into his back. And they're all weapons from different eras of that. War is definitely one of the horsemen that has been hungering for the apocalypse the hardest, personally, I would say, and has carried a lot of that with him, with the weapons he has pierced into his back. They don't bother him. It's just easier than having a holster. It's kind of the whole idea there. But we wanted to bring in that kind of the modern kind of military meddling, the gas mask in particular, being a representation of not just World War II, World War One. I think there's definitely a feeling that he probably made the point the world should have ended after World War One, and was a bit ignored. And now have World War II, and it's like a bit of a "I told you so" kind of moment. So that's war. Of this kind of that it was absorbing all of the conflict and representation of that kind of on Earth, and being swelled up by it, and ready to kind of unleash it back on the world. Next, we have let's do pestilence next. So pestilence, I wanted to kind of take that idea of the kind of like wartime nurse, the kind of Florence Nightingale image, and basically pervert the shit out of it. Like, just make it really, really, really horrible. Of that, this sickly light of pestilence is something that you should fear. Of that actually being bathed in that light is something that will make you ill. It could potentially kill you. And we wanted to kind of get this almost like hell from Norse mythology, that idea of the kind of almost false image of the kind of friendly nurse on one side with a lantern, with just boils, pustulence, and kind of plague kind of pouring out. Very, very Nurgle coded for sure. It's definitely an inspiration of just like as many boils as we could possibly put on there, as well as bringing in flies as an element. So this kind of idea of like actual pests themselves, something that obviously with like trench warfare, bombed out cities, abandoned areas, was really, really prevalent and a massive problem for carrying disease. So this idea of like swarming pests, pestilence on one side, and the kind of promise of false healing kind of on the other is very much where pestilence sits.
It has almost.
I think about pestilence.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was saying, what I love about pestilence is actually at first glance, if you kind of just like have a glance across the cover, it almost looks like just a nurse out to help, and all those details are what really bring her to life as one of the horsemen. Like, to me, that's the most exciting thing about her as a model, is the others are innately more menacing. But the more you look into pestilence, the more you're rewarded with the grotesqueness coming through.
It's the kind of thing of that, almost an anglerfish style character, as I would call her, of that at a distance, the light is alluring, the shape seems like one of safety. The silhouette is one that a lot of people will have learned to trust over the war period, when actually it is one of the most dangerous. So yes, it's definitely.
It kind of harks towards that kind of old school Will of the Wisp mythology for me as well. That lantern with the promise of safety, the light in the pestilent bog that draws the traveller in, and then turns out to not be all that it seems. Yeah, I also like this idea that we've kind of got not only the recent history of World War II, but also World War One, Crimea, and kind of all of that condensed period of conflict in the age of sort of modernity, as it were, and the horsemen all gravitating towards different sections of that, depending on which bits they're the most attached to.
Yeah, no, it's the kind of idea of that, the the birth of the modern age and the modernization of warfare is definitely what is marching towards their idea of the apocalypse, and what should be the trigger for ending the world, for sure.
Which quite nicely takes you to death.
Yeah,
It does take you to death. I think it takes death and famine. I think have a lot to do with the modernity of war, which is really interesting. In terms of like the climate post World War II, for death in particular, we kind of wanted to represent kind of obviously have classic death with the scythe and the skull, but death for me is more. It's in classical representations. It's more represented with hourglasses and things that are talking about time and people running out of time. And I think for a lot of people, like when you were looking at the classical representation of the Four Horsemen, with death in particular, it was more people's life expectancies were so much shorter. They were so short on time, and it was something that they feared, that death was always around the corner and the march of time was always going faster than they would expect. In the 1950s is that kind of, like kind of bit of like healthcare was improving. You had all of these modern kind of improvements. Everyone's life expectancy was going up kind of post World War II, like in general, kind of on the planet. But that kind of puts death in an interesting position of kind of what is the anxiety around death? What is the big fear? And that is 100% in the 50s kind of era is the atomic bomb. It is the fear of mass annihilation, mass death in the click of your fingers, and kind of being absolutely obliterated by this tool of modern warfare that the vast majority people were horrified by, and kind of at the end of the war. And you can kind of see that very subtly, and there will be more artwork where we make this more pronounced for sure, is that growing inside of Death's ribcage is an atomic bomb. And there will definitely, for some interesting posts coming later on about the cults that surround all the different horsemen, Death has a very particular atomic focus, which is one that I'm very excited for, being a big fan of Fallout and people who are, and also Doctor Strangelove. It's yeah, for kind of in like jumping into some very weird cultists who are kind of basically chasing the atom bomb.
Yeah, because that's probably a good point to make here as well. Is obviously the conflict between the Sisterhood and the Horsemen isn't just about the Horsemen themselves. You're not turning up and immediately getting into a scrap with War himself. There is a cult. There are cults and collections of activities around each of the Horsemen that they are using their influence on Earth to rile up and move towards the apocalypse. So yeah, let's move on to famine really quickly, and then we should talk some more about the cults, because that's a really interesting part of the setting as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So famine as our kind of final horseman here of the main four is a different representation to the kind of classical scarcity of food and kind of sustenance. I was thinking more about, in terms of on a global scale, what does modernized warfare eat? Like, what does it consume? And in this case, metals, fuel, munitions, you name it. It was a huge drain on everyone across the world in terms of like fuel shortages, power cuts. There not being kind of enough metal for like construction and rebuilding work because it all been used in tanks and weapons. It drained the world of resources that were needed for rebuilding and moving the world forwards. And instead they were used within war, and they were kind of greedily consumed to be expended upon death and warfare. And that's kind of what we wanted to bring to famine, as you can kind of see with these, almost a kind of like a kind of hungering, starving, walking factory. They're wandering around, kind of guzzling up as many resources as they can, and spewing out kind of toxic smog from these horrible bent and twisted exhausts that kind of line the whole kind of swathe of their spine. So yes, so it's very much a different idea of famine, of that it's not to do with traditional food-based hunger. It's more about the resources of the world after World War II and kind of what modernized warfare took from that.
Because famine was definitely the one that took us the longest to kind of get to grips with in terms of what we wanted them to represent within the setting. Lots of the other ones kind of came together almost by themselves. Death, once the nuclear sort of atomic angle, we'd landed on that, but came together very easily. And pestilence and war kind of are much easier to code in almost any setting because of how almost timeless those themes are, whilst the ideas of death and famine change, I think, quite a lot between time periods. So before we move on to the cult, the actual question that we need, and the fifth horseman, because we talked about the fifth horseman as well, is which is your guys' favourite? Which is your of the four? Which one do you think is the most interesting, the most cool?
I think I covered that already for me, like Pestilence. It's that will o' the wisp. I think the stories you can do with Pestilence involving Pestilence herself within the story more accessibly than the others makes it such an exciting character. I know for me, when I look at kind of the campaigns I want to run, with the kind of the plague things you can do, postural setting through, those little signs of people within the cult, it's for me, is it like running a game? It's got everything I want from a character. It's kind of like a big bad. So for me, that's where I'm really drawn to.
How about you, Barney? Who's your favourite?
I think for me it's probably War. I think realistically War is the easiest one to write for an adventure, because you can any kind of violence in any kind of degree you can apply to War in some kind. And I think for me, as a history nerd, the idea of the remnants of malcontents from World War II being dragged into kind of war's sphere, and then kind of riled up again, is the bit that really interests me.
No, it's a real difficult choice for me.
Is it like picking your favourite child?
A little bit. I'd say probably for me, I love them all equally, but I don't care for Jove. No, I think for me, I think writing wise, I think the one I'm interested in the most and I'm excited to delve into more is probably Famine, because I think we've managed to land on a very different representation of famine. And I'm really looking forward to kind of looking at what does it look like kind of when we're exploring resources being drained, like kind of from society, kind of like what conflicts come up when resources are suddenly kind of taken away. And actually has, I think, a lot of hook-ins to a lot of modern conflict as well that we've kind of seen around that. So I think famine has an interesting road that leads kind of into the future as well, which is an interesting place to kind of make some satirical commentary there that in terms of like that kind of extends beyond our own setting that we're placing this in. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And there are some cultists that are definitely going to be like drinking oil, so like that's going to be really fun. Very, very like big fan of famine.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the fifth horseman, and then we'll get on to some cults.
So, fifth horseman. So this is Sariel, who I've labelled as the shithill son of the devil. So for those kind of not as au fait, kind of like with religious law, like in general, the son of Satan is generally associated with the apocalypse of being that once the apocalypse happens, like that is their domain. That they kind of are on, that they get to rule over it. It's like their vibe, their jam. It's fundamentally a fated purpose for a character within that mythos. And the whole idea that you hit up up against World War II, they're kind of sitting back being like, it's my time, the end of the world is coming, I'm gonna, get to basically finally be the Prince of Hell and have something to do. And then suddenly, Dad's decided no. He's talked to God. They're not feeling it. It's not happening today. There is this sense of teenage rebellion of him. It's why I call him a shithill, of that Sariel really wants to be in the limelight and have his day, even though he's not earned it. He's a nepotistic fuck, and he's basically just wanting to burn the world down so he can sit on a throne of skulls and feel good about himself at the cost of literally everything ending. Which is, if that's not an ego, I don't know. And a villainous one at that, I don't know what is. So that's what, and it's been like, oh yes, and I'm going to give myself a new name, Conquest, and rile up the horsemen and make it be like, oh, you've been denied. Like, let's ride out, let's go. So it's before, I think the horsemen would have basically wanted to ride out at different points in history, when it was the Black Death, pestilence was real game, when you've ever had a major kind of conflict, war's really there, but death's generally pretty like, it's always around, I can go whenever, and famine at like certain points, like where you have like massive droughts or things like that around the world, they were kind of ready to go. But what it's taken is someone who, in Sariel, who has their own external want for the world to end, their own motivation to want that to happen for their own gain, to basically turn to each of them, placate their need of what they have been made for, and be like, let's hustle, we're riding out. And has very much kind of gone for the classical Prince of Hell kind of look, but kind of bedrangled, kind of all in white. And it is the kind of one thing where Conquest sits very differently, is that because Sariel is not built for the end of the world. Like, that's not his purpose. He is the son of the devil. That's what he's been promised. That's what he's said to be fated to do. But ultimately, like the Four, he is not what I would call a genus loci. He is not a manifestation of place. And for the Four Horsemen, they are a genus loci of a concept upon earth. And Sariel isn't that, because ultimately he wants to sit upon the ashes of earth as his throne. He doesn't actually represent anything. He only represents himself and what he wants to conquer.
I think interestingly, Charlie, he actually kind of represents that post-war nihilism in kind of like the Nietzschean approach of the like horrors of World War II have sort of disenfranchised a lot of people from faith and religion, and science has kind of taken over in a lot of regards. And one of the responses to that is that the kind of like just burn it all to the ground. And I think that's a really interesting angle maybe for Conquest, is that, well, maybe the world should end. This idea that there is that thought in humanity that maybe we shouldn't be allowed to carry on going after that.
But this is the interesting argument, isn't it? Is that like, that's the reasoning, that's the convincing to get the horsemen to ride out. But ultimately, we should all burn it down. It's all gone terribly. Humanity's had their day, but
it's
we
all
only do it
really.
if I get to sit on top of the ash pile and be king.
Yeah,
and that's the little seed there that takes it from, it's not ideological, it's purely selfish. In terms of like what's actually driving Conquest. It's like, idealistically, he will be preaching and giving you big bad speeches until the cows come home, but deep down, he wants to be sitting on his throne on earth, and that's what it's about, for
Fantastic.
Sure.
Right, should we get into a bit of like the cults and how these guys are actually getting involved with the affairs of Earth? And digging their grubby celestial claws into the human world.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there are various cults. I won't spoil too much about like kind of their specific like vibes, because they're all quite particular, because there's multiple cults under each horseman. But the whole vibe of the cults and what they're doing is they are enacting the will of kind of each of the horsemen's own specific brand, to try and worsen the world and bring it to a state where things are so bad, there's so much negative energy, there's so many terrible things happening that the apocalypse simply just cannot be denied. Or even in small pockets, make something so conceptually terrible, in terms of like finding a vial of the Black Plague and unleashing it on a town, for example, that makes the situation so uniquely like vile, but also specific to one of the horsemen, pestilence, that they could briefly emerge and push the needle a little bit further. But it's all about them working and scheming together to have these moments of incursion, but also to make the world basically get to that knife edge, so then they can just be like, here we are, and then push it off. And then all of a sudden, the war for the end of the world starts. Everyone mucks in, but the horsemen and Sariel are riding out first. So that's the cult's purpose. But they're all quite, as cults tend to be, quite fractious. They believe different elements need to be focused on for whichever of their patron they find most alluring. So there are a lot of schemes, a lot of different ways to make the world terrible. And our cults all have very different motivations in terms of like how they want to do that, and at what scale, and what they think will tip things towards the apocalypse. So for the cults of the horsemen, they'll be a big part of the adventures. And yes, that's their kind of general vibe.
Fantastic. So that kind of gives us the setup, and as you can see here, lots of the artwork is nuns absolutely going to town on cultists of various horsemen. So now we've kind of set up the two opposing sides of the story world. We've got our diverse collection of nuns with a set of skills. They will find you, and they will hurt you. And our 5 horsemen and their cultists on the other side. Should we talk a little bit about the actual game of Sisterhood? So, Charlie, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of character creation and representing that kind of diversity of nuns in the game? Talk about kind of like what you wanted nuns to feel like as like within the game itself.
Yeah, so in terms of like the mechanical side of making a character, it's really, really kind of quick and fast. When you're starting out, you get given a starting dice array that uses your main polyhedral set, and then you assign that to one of our 4 attributes. So Matt, being my wonderful assistant, has opened us up with our physical quick starts, which I'll talk about a little bit some more. So we have got faith, cunning, empathy, and fortitude as our 4 main attributes. So faith is anything, well, faith-based. It's whether that is like blessing the ground, making water holy, kind of, trying to kind of summon some holy energy to imbue it onto a weapon. It's probably the closest kind of attribute that we have to something magical, in terms of like if you're coming from more of a fancy RPG background, but it has very kind of interesting specific uses. Also, with like kind of general religious law as well, it's one that you can use to be like, right, I need to remember a specific bit from the Demonomicon of like how to specifically punch this demon and where and what with. And faith would probably be something I'd get you to roll for that. Cunning is all about deception, sneakiness, fighting from range, using ranged weapons, kind of being like kind of fast and kind of quick on your feet. Empathy is all about seeing whether people are lying to you, how well you can deceive, how well you can use that wimple and prayer to blend yourself in to your kind of like social environment, to kind of get away with stuff. I mean, one of the things I talked about in the previous stream that I love about having nuns as characters is they are people that and figures that we naturally assume are innocent, wouldn't do harm, or basically have like this imagery that's kind of quite pious and remote, of that, like, oh, it's a nun, like we don't need to bother them. Like, you're not going to be, like metal detecting the sister to see if she's got a shotgun under the habit when she's trying to go to Sunday mass. Like it'd be something that would be a real rarity. There's an implicit trust there that the empathy skill really plays off of that disguising in plain sight in some ways, and it's also kind of your classic like kind of talking skill. So in terms of like if you're like looking to charm someone, you're looking to intimidate someone and kind of go down that route, then empathy is definitely going to be there. And there's going to be loads of cases like where that comes in, of where you're going down a more investigative road of trying to figure out like who's part of a cult, where are they based, like kind of what their plans are, how can you infiltrate. Empathy is going to be really, really key. And then there's fortitude, which is the power of your mitts. And how kind of generally tough you are. So that's how much physical damage you can deal out and how much you can take. So it's kind of heavily tied to your health or your body points, and kind of stacks with that. And is all about that kind of staying kind of strong, kind of in the face of like heavy amounts of damage, but also being able to like pick up the sword, Joan of Arc's sword, and swing it hard at a cultist's head, or get down and dirty in a barroom brawl and slip on your cross knuckle dusters and kind of uppercut that demon. So that's very much going to be like Fortitude's vibe. So your starting array, so you get 1d10, 2d8s, and a d6, and you basically assign them to those attributes, and that's where you start. That then has scaling in terms of like how your body and your spirit, like your kind of physical health and your spiritual health are calculated, but it's really, really easy. And kind of from there, that gives you the dice that you roll when you're asked to make a check against that attribute. So all of the things I've just been describing there in terms of what those attributes are about, your game master, your mother superior, as we have called the game master, will ask you. They will ask you to make a faith check, a cunning check, an empathy check. And in the case of Sisterhood, there are two types of check. It can be a flat check. So say I said to Matt, you want to bless this ground. It's been covered with kind of loads of like horrible devilish etchings, so it's going to be quite difficult. That's going to be a flat check of 8. So you roll your dice that you have kind of in faith and see if you could beat an 8. The other style of check, which is more common in combat particularly, is an opposed check, where you'd be rolling dice directly against the Mother Superior, whether I'm representing like a cultist, for example. So say Matt was trying to shoot me with a shotgun, he'd be rolling cunning. Maybe I'm trying to dodge out the way, or maybe I'm a big tanky cultist, I'm trying to sink it into my chest and take it on some armored plating. I would roll my fortitude to defend, and whoever gets higher wins. So in that case, if Matt won, then I would take damage. But that's how we kind of work opposed checks as well. Whoever gets highest wins. So it's really, really simple, really, really quick, and kind of has that flexibility in the two types of checks. So, a door's not going to oppose you, so a flat check makes more sense. But a cultist trying to hit you with an automated wrench is definitely going to oppose you. So you want to be kind of rolling 2 dice there. And so that's kind of where you start. But then in terms of representing the different styles of nuns that are kind of there and like where they've come from, one of the key parts that we've not included in terms of character creation, in terms of our quick start, but you'll see that every nun that's been pre-made for that quick start has a past skill. And the idea is that everyone who has joined the Sisterhood, who has become a nun, was something else in the past. They've become they're bringing something else to the table that they can't fully leave behind, and actually that is the key to the Sisterhood. That's what enriches it. So your past adds a lovely bit of flavor. It gives you a skill that you can use kind of in combat or out of combat. But there's also a way for you to recharge your divinity, which are a powerful point system that we have for superpowering weapons, certain abilities. You can spend divinity, and you can recharge that in various different ways, either through engaging with your past and your abilities that you have there, or you can say a little prayer. But remember, doing a prayer in combat is quite dangerous, so it leaves you very much open for attack. And speaking of prayers, all the sisters get access to a simple prayer. But you'll notice also on the preset characters that the sisters have been given their own prayers as well. And this is something that we're developing that is kind of going into the book, is the prayer book of the Sisterhood. So these are like specialist kind of prayers that invoke special effects that can help defend, help heal, help set your sword on fire so you can stab a cultist and set them aflame. Like various different ones that are going to kind of help you out there. You'll also notice on the character sheet as well, we have our cross experience track. So for our stories, we call them missions, as the kind of Sisterhood are sent out on missions to kind of root out different cultists and what's happening. Depending on how well you do on that mission, we put experience points for the objectives of the mission. So there isn't XP for like killing like one cultist or one thing. It's not like heavy numerical. It's what I'm calling objective-based experience. So if you manage to storm the chapel, cleanse it of evil, kill the demon, and recover the holy artifact, then you may be getting, and those are your objectives, and you do all of them, you're going to get all of the XP that's assigned to them. Some may have more XP than others. But all you need to do is acquire 5 XP, and then you go up a level where there will be various effects that it will kind of be in place. It can be getting new skills that you can use, new prayers, so you can kind of focus on studying the prayer book, increasing your dice sizes, and various extra boons that you can have to really kind of play through kind of as your nun character and build out a real kick-ass sister by the end of your story.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, we did a lot in the design of the system to make sure that you could play as kind of any nun you wanted to. We wanted everything from the pious young nun who goes to church every Sunday and maybe is tapping into that faith with powers, all the way through to grizzled Agatha fleeing a loan shark who isn't maybe the best church attending of the sisterhood, but is really, really good with a baseball bat. And it's having that diversity of characters that we think is going to be really exciting and really fun for people playing, because as we know, the most interesting thing about role-playing games is the variety of characters you can inhabit that are not like yourself. And as much as I'd love to think that we're going to get some nuns playing this, I'm not sure that there are going to be that many. But
as well, adding that to the bespokenness as well, being a classless system means you can make the character as you wish.
Yeah. Yes, so it's going to be an ability, a skill picking system, depending on what stats and things that you have. So there's going to be huge amounts of routes for building a very kind of custom character and not locking you into a heavy play style like from early on. So yes, no, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, no, so and you can have a look at all of obviously the pre-gens and lots of the base rules in the quick start. That's available now for free on the page, so you can go and take a look at that, have a play with some friends, don your wimples and give it a try. One thing that we didn't really touch on that when we're talking about the system and characters is the combat system, because the combat system is one of the most unique things I would say about Sisterhood as a system. Is it has this very, very different, almost like combination between theatre of the mind and grid combat that is very much unique. I know one of the jokes that me and Charlie made when we were working on this is we called it the Nun Carter as our working thing. Now the cross combat system, and this kind of represents the battle of good versus evil that is taking place in the world of Sisterhood, and then represents that in a completely unique battle map that you can use for any combat. So Charlie, if you want to have a little talk about sort of where the idea came from about this and the development of it.
Absolutely. Like in terms of like illustrative inspirations of like where kind of this came from, I've been over the past few years been really getting into my low model count skirmish games, and been really enjoying like that heavy tactical element that you kind of have when you have a small kind of count on either side, and you're trying to kind of test each other's defenses, like kind of find thing, and it very much plays like a violent chess game, which I very much enjoy. And actually, I would say it's interesting. It's one that I think it's one that I don't think about as referencing as a kind of touchstone here, but actually chess was actually a massive part of our early lives. Me and Barney played it with our grandfather constantly when we were younger as well. And that idea of this kind of tactical battle, but it being kind of very set, and your kind of pieces having these very unique movesets and interesting things that you could do always really appealed to me. But I also got into stuff like Warhammer Underworlds with their kind of hex-based system, which is really fun and interesting abilities. But also like in terms of interesting like maneuver shapes. Like we've been playing Arkham Horror a lot as a group, and although it's a card system with kind of the movement there, and it doesn't really kind of have that same combat element, there was something about the laying out a series of cards in a diamond and then in a cross and then anything to represent different environments. It was really interesting to me. I thought that was quite fun. But then the real lightning bolt really was when I was thinking about the lore of the Sisterhood and thinking about their training and how they actually approach this, is what you're looking at with the battle map, with the way of the cross, with the cross and the pentagram, is how the sisters actually view the battlefield in their heads. So this is how they are tactically trained to think about combats that involve the occult, involve cults that need to be put down. They know there's probably going to be a ritualistic element kind of in the pentagram, so they know that's something they need to watch out for. They know kind of all of their tactical positioning and where and who's going to be working towards what thing best. Because the thing we have found with Sisterhood, kind of with this system, is there is a lot more talking. So in any like other grid-based systems, I mean, we've played Pathfinder, D&D, the works. Like we love RPGs, and as a designer, one of the things I've noticed is two things when it comes to grid-based combat. Is one, a ton of setup time, whether you're doing it on a VTT or on a table and you're needing all your terrain and all your pieces to make it kind of feel like really, really good. Representing like lots of different maps and the minutiae of there. It's like, yes, you get a lot of detail, but you lose a lot of game time, or you lose a lot of personal time as a GM to be able to kind of set up. Is one thing. This is something that this completely solves, because the whole idea of this, of it being what we call a conceptual battle map, the way that people think about the environment that they're fighting in, it means that this map can represent a ruined church. It can be an abandoned trench system. It can be a French idyllic town that's kind of besieged by cultists. It can be a forest. It can be anything that you want it to be. And in your descriptions as GM, as the Mother Superior, you can represent that in terms of the more theatre of the mind side. But in the kind of tactical side, you can then attach those descriptions to these very set positions that you have kind of on the map. And all you need to do is get the two battle boards or kind of sheets of paper, or in the case of our printed quick starts, just fold it out and lay it flat. And if you know your positioning from the adventure, you're ready to go. And that is something that really appeals to me as a game master massively.
I think what's really interesting as well is you reference the battle maps. And when you are playing on a battle map, quite often what you're looking at as you're playing the rogue, you're like, okay, how can I get into cover? And what you're not doing is kind of like necessarily explaining in a role play sense what you're doing. You're looking for those mechanical points. And actually, once you remove that and say, well, you can get into cover, now tell us how you're doing it. What it brings you is this whole party working together to create an environment. And it's really exciting because it allows your players to bring role play aspects into it, not just the person running the game. So it's really conceptual, almost group-led environment, which the theatre of the mind combined with the viewing on the tabletop, to me, super exciting. Because as a player, I want to be like, there's got to be some barrels. I'm going to go and grab a barrel and do this and jump here and explain what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and not be limited by, well, actually, there's not a barrel on the map, so you can't use it. And, you know, everyone's going to have these visions of how the world exists. So let the players interact with this as well, not just the person running the game.
It also has that great solution to kind of the fog of war problem that GMs have, where people walk into an area and you're trying to keep stuff secret in your battle map. With a conceptual battle map like this, you can keep all of the secrets you want, because just because somebody's in the ritual circle, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've seen everything. There could be multiple different facets to the ritual that maybe they've not encountered yet. Or maybe when they go up to their vantage point, they find that there's a cultist already there hiding. All these kind of things that you can insert and do as a GM without being restricted by a traditional grid system, where if somebody walks into the square that you're planning something in, you're kind of gazumped.
So I think you've kind of hit kind of on the point perfectly, of that it gives narrative agency to the players in terms of being like, this is what I'm doing and like kind of how I'm doing it, and then being able to like do that very, very quickly and not being, as you say, gazumped by kind of some particulars of the environment. I mean, we have particulars on there like terrain modifiers that can make certain things difficult, but there's things that people are aware of. So it's this blend of kind of giving your players narrative agency whilst maintaining kind of tight tactical acuity that is like fun and fast paced, and isn't kind of losing, and you're not losing out on how your character plays, because the battle map has something that takes your build and makes it not work, as well. I was going to say my main second point as well, like from observing other kind of grid-based systems in terms of just how players play, and it's not a criticism of players at all, and it's quite often the way that it works with class-based systems as well, is players with grid-based systems where you've got a lot going on and you've got a lot of mechanics to kind of keep track of will get very in their own heads, I have noticed, like running games, and they will plan out their own turn and they will do it and they will execute it and be like, right, that's my turn, and then they'll kind of like watch next turn play out and it kind of goes round. What Sisterhood forces you to do in the best possible way is be so aware of, because there are less places on the board, and there are so many abilities that synergize off other abilities that players have, that positioning, knowing where your sisters are, what your sisters can do, and how you can best, help a sister out, in terms of actually making your stuff pop off in the best possible way, means that when I'm doing my turn, like Matt's kind of throwing in some advice, being like, oh, well, actually I can do this thing, Barney's saying something like that, another thing, then all of a sudden, and it's the thing that I found when play testing this, you're in a constant circle of conversation of being like, okay, what's the best thing to do? Okay, we do this, you do that. Okay, I'm gonna kick this cultist from near into brawl. I've got a baseball bat, and then I'm going to fastball special that person into flank, where then we've got another sister primed to shoot them out of the air with a shotgun, and then they're dead. And all of a sudden, we've kind of, through that conversation, created a fucking badass moment, but also engaged with each other's characters, had more communicative play around the table, and just like kind of had fun doing it. It's like it makes you not play your own game as your character. It makes you play as the Sisterhood. Like the sisters, you're never on your own. That's the point. You've got to work with your sisters to beat the apocalypse.
And that is kind of the perfect tie-in, really, into kind of the combat system and that collaborative element, wanting to represent the Sisterhood as a whole. So I think we've probably covered pretty well the world of Sisterhood and also kind of some key points from the game. So should we delve a little bit into all of the cool stuff that we've put together for Sisterhood that people can pick up as part of this very exciting back-kit launch?
Absolutely. So I think kind of starting off with the kind of big one is our core rulebook. So this is going to be a kind of 96-page plus kind of core rulebook that will give you everything you need to make your nuns, kind of get your cross combat going, everything you need to kind of play in there, and there'll be a small adventure in the back of there as well. So if you want to dip your toe in, give Sisterhood a try, then the core book is a really, really good place to start. Then we kind of start delving into our expansion books. So we've got for the 5 horsemen. This is digging into the kind of the key conflicts of the horsemen as your big bads. So a bit more lore, a bunch more information on the cults, advice on kind of like how you can build out your own stories like around those cults and tell bigger stories, as well as kind of exemplar adventures that are themed around those horsemen, kind of giving a bigger story, kind of trying to link them all together as well. So that's your kind of let's fight the 4 horsemen apocalypse, and the Armageddon that they're trying to bring about. Then we have, actually, in terms of like we've talked about different factions, a different faction that we've not talked about that much, which is a host of rebel angels for Sister Judgment Day. So the whole idea here is that in the angelic host, there is a group that also have a very similar feeling to the Horsemen, of that the world should have ended after World War II, and basically humanity fucked it up. They've ruined Earth. They have not been the kind of ideal creation that kind of like God wanted them to be, and we should probably just hit the reset button and start again. This one gets really interesting because it's the sisters fighting against something that it may be a rebellious element of their kind of side of the faith, but they are still faith images. Like they are fighting angels, which to say a nun fighting an angel kind of feels strange, which is an interesting one, and it's also this thing of that. In order to fight against these really powerful enemies, the one thing that is going to do the most damage against them is demonic artifacts. So we get this interesting thing where the sisters are really going to have to explore their faith and kind of how they interact with that in order to kind of be pragmatic and save the world, and at what cost to themselves can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And then we have our 3 main dice sets. So we've got first our nun dice sets, where you'll notice the D4s. We've got 4 of them in a nun dice set, and they are coloured to look like little nuns. The main reason for this, if you go check out the free quick start guide, you'll see that there is a rule called helping sister out, where when you are kind of aiding one another, kind of in some form of check, the sisters can start throwing extra D4s onto somebody's check as physically representing a sister coming to help out. Then we have our 2 other dice sets, kind of like for your gyms, of whether you're kind of going down the more demonic horseman path or the angelic path. And we've got our kind of demonic and angelic kind of magma style dice set, and our kind of more marbly style dice set. Then we have our absolutely badass Mother Superior GM screen. So this is going to have a load of lovely artwork from Ben on the front, as you can see, as well as all the great quick reference guides that you need for running the game on the back of it as well. Then finally, we've got our battle pack. So this is our kind of token sheet and battle map ready to use, being bundled together. So this will give you a host of enemies, including the kind of tokens of the horsemen themselves, the kind of 2 A4 sheets kind of battle map, as well as some tokens for the sisters themselves, and the effects that both they and their enemies can put upon the battle map as well. So yeah, a nice kind of fun new item for us to be trying out. Then finally, our limited edition, our backer kit exclusive, the confessional box slipcase. So if Sisterhood is really your jam, and this is something you really, really like, and you want to be that nun smoking within the confessional booth, then our slipcase is designed to hold all of the 3 main books of Sisterhood inside that deluxe confessional booth slipcase box. So yeah, so this will be a backer kit exclusive.
You sound excited about it.
Yeah, so I cannot wait for the confessional booth slipcase. It's generally, when we had the idea for that, I was absolutely giddy, especially when Ben confirmed he could draw smoke coming out of it, that Nun was having a cheeky cigarette in the booth. Made me very happy.
It's also the first slipcase we've done, so as like a publisher, we're also really, really excited about it, because I know me and Charlie certainly are big book collecting nerds and have plenty of slipcased goodies in our own collection. So being able to create something like that we know will have lovely homes on some beautiful shelves is really awesome. So I'll just dig in quickly to the pledge levels and how you can get all of these. So if you're just looking to dip your toe into Sisterhood, we've got a couple of options with the initiate pledge. If you want to go down the digital route, if your bookshelf is absolutely heaving under the weight of all of those role-playing games, then we've got a digital copy of the core rulebook as the opening pledge. We've also got a physical version where you get both the physical core book and the digital copy as well. And then we've got our sister pledge. For those a bit deeper into the Sisterhood order, we have the option for all 3 books that we're making, either in a digital format or with the physical and digital option as well. And then we've got our all-in pledge, which is the Mother Superior, the head honcho of the Sisterhood, and the deluxe slipcase that's limited only to the backer kit release. Superior pledge, but there's one additional part to it. You get to create a saint, a religious icon in the world of Sisterhood, and we will work with you to create that for you, and we'll make a prayer certificate and all kinds of fun stuff to go with that as well. So if you want to immortalize yourself or a friend or a family member or even a pet as a saint in the world of Sisterhood, you can do if you would like. We've also got all of these available as add-ons. So if you're wanting to pick up individual elements and do a bit more of a customized pledge, like if you're not that bothered about these there horsemen, but fighting some angels feels like something that you'd be down for. So I think probably the other thing we need to talk about is Pocketopia, this big old launch that we're taking part in. So Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about Pocketopia and kind of what's going on BackerKit in general?
Sure. So Pocketopia is a really exciting, almost like mini convention put together by the team of Rebecca Kit. They've done some before, they're Pintopias, and basically it's pulling together a collection of creators, all who are creating products in a similar vein. So this is designed to be games that are more accessible, easier to pick up, generally smaller, hence why ours is a smaller format game as opposed to big A4 boxes with tons of rules. And I think there's something like 70 creators all involved over the period. So everyone's releasing today. Go check out all the Poctopia campaigns. There are some amazing ones going on. And the added part is we are paired up with another creator. So we have Rusty Revolvers.
Yes, so we're collaborating with a big old friend of Parable Games, Neon Rot, another UK-based creator, kind of on the scene, who is making a horribly haunted Russian roulette game. You can play with your friends, where it's a card-based game. You're playing Russian roulette, but as your hand develops and kind of the bullets in the chamber keep clicking dry, your actual gun hand itself mutates and changes into kind of horrible, strange things. So with it being the Nuns with Guns RPG, we thought that this would be a absolutely perfect collaboration. So Willow from Neon Rot has designed for us the Chamber of Asmodeus, which is a terrifying golden gun of a demon, which we will be making a unique item card for. That will be kind of shipping with pledges for those who do the cross-backing element of Pocketopia. So that's something that happens if you back both projects. So if you back us and you also back Rusty Revolvers, for us kind of at a physical pledge level, then that's something we can ship out to you.
And you get the 4 Horseman cards for Rusty Revolvers.
You do
the other way.
Yes. So I've designed some mutagen cards for Neon Rot, all based off of the kind of 4 kind of OG Horsemen to kind of mess up your hand in interesting, apocalyptically themed ways. So yeah, they're really, really exciting. And then I think there's a little bit more about Pocketopia.
Yeah. So if you back 6 unique projects as well, you also get a Pocketopia dice bag, which I think is right at the bottom of that screen there, Barney.
Yes, somewhere. Let me keep going down.
Yeah. So basically, the more projects you pledge, then the more.
We've got Rich over at Hatch Games, who's doing Ghast, a horrifying zine collection. That's kind of more solo focused
with some great authors.
Amazing authors in there. So yeah, there's so much stuff to check out. So if RPG is your jam, there is definitely a kind of six backer combination if you're after that exclusive dice bag that you can that you'll definitely be able to get.
I noticed when I was browsing on Blue Sky in the car earlier, that Wiry Fight's being demoed over at Aircon this weekend. So another Pocketopia partner here. So we're going to go and check the game out one evening when we get some free time.
And that reminds me, speaking of Aircon, which is where we currently are, we've just finished doing the setup. There is no rest for the wicked. If you back Sisterhood, or if you've already backed Sisterhood, or you want to back Sisterhood at the show, and you come see us at Aircon, we have some exclusive printed versions of the Quick Start that we will be giving out for free for people who have already backed. And also, if you've already backed and come to the stall, you'll get £5 off at the Parable stall whilst we're at Aircon as well, as a thank you for supporting this project and helping our revolver toting nuns come to life.
Yeah, and thanks so much for your support already, guys. We are nearly funded already on which is spectacular.
I don't know.
With a big old backer train on the choo-choo. So we're probably going to close up the stream here, guys. We'll all be around on various points. So if you have got any questions or want to know anything more about Sisterhood, drop some comments on the page, drop us an email, drop us some comments on social media, and we'll wax lyrical about our wonderful nun world with you.
So to finish the stream off, Barney, I noticed you put a great question out earlier on the communities page.
I did.
About what part of the world are each of us most excited to explore. And I think that's a great way to close up the stream. So as the question asker, I'll be nice and go first so you guys can think.
Okay.
So I think for me, what's really exciting is we're entering into this post-war world where people have seen absolute atrocities, their world's been upended, and people are looking for an escape. So some people will turn to religion, some people will turn to friends, and some people are going to turn to these cults. And so some of these cultists aren't going to be the monodimensional cultists you sometimes run into in other games. They're layered real people who've come into a horrible situation. So as the nun, your first inclination is, yes, to go in there with your knuckle dusters, punch them in the face. But actually, especially in the outer echelons of these environments, you're going to have some really interesting moral choices with the people you're interacting with and how you approach that. And as a world building based like GM, I'm really excited to explore that and see how my players interact with some of those more nuanced characters you can really get, especially like I say at the outer areas of those cults. And for me, that's going to be such a fun experience.
I think for me, like kind of thinking about the players in particular, I am very excited to see more hard-boiled, cigar-chomping nun roleplay, because I've already seen some in playtesting and it makes me a very happy boy. But in terms of the interesting thing about like people playing as nuns and this diversity of nuns kind of coming into the sisterhood, I'm really interested to see the interpersonal stories that come out of playgroups of like, how do those sisters gel together? What are the conflicts there? What is the drama that is inherent to people of different faith and different backgrounds coming together and trying to work together to stop the world from ending, but not necessarily agreeing all the time? So I think it's one of the things that kind of attracted me to as an idea is there is such a fertile ground for seeding interesting drama and interesting characters, and I'm really interested to seeing like kind of what sisters people come up with and how they interact together as a sisterhood.
Yeah, that young pious nun interacting with the grizzled Mother Superior veteran with both totally different worldviews being displaced from their countries. Yeah, that's exciting.
I think for me it kind of is an expansion on from the bit I was talking about earlier when saying that war was probably the horseman I was most interested in. It's looking at that alt history sort of twinge on sisterhood of what does the world look like and what is that kind of interplay between the horsemen in this conflict and the remnants of World War II. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff from a narrative perspective, because you have two distinct sides of that conflict. You have the winners and the losers, and the horsemen are active in both of those in very, very different ways. And I think you can tell some really interesting stories in both the kind of victorious allies, perhaps it not being so sunny at home even after they're winning the war as it may seem, and similarly the other side, things being still bad in the world of the Axis powers and having a bad time there still, and what anxieties and kind of elements of the societies that have lost the war are the horsemen pulling out on the strings to keep that conflict going and keep that like instability in the forefront. I think that's going to be some really interesting stories to tell.
The three very different answers then.
Yeah. I kind of think that also plays to just how much stuff you can play with in Sisterhood, and the kind of the breadth of the world and the stories. It's not just, as much as we have announced it as a nuns with guns role-playing game, it's a much bigger and broader jumping off point for stories and worlds as well. And I think with that, we can probably wrap up our stream. I know these boys definitely need to run off and finish setting up for aircon and get a good night's sleep for the weekend of conventioning. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for our launch stream. And thanks to those who've already backed Sister and supported. We'll be coming out with loads of updates with even more info about Sister very soon. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, Rob.